communities most in need.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard horror stories about the government's attempts to roll out PPE deliveries and COVID-19 testing. Members of the James Smith Cree First Nation were told by Indigenous Services staff to sew their own masks. This government, Mr. Speaker, sent PPE to China and told Indigenous Canadians to sew their own masks. Will the Prime Minister have a real plan to ensure vaccine distribution to First Nation communities are a priority, or will they once again be told to fend for themselves?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, this government has stepped up in partnership with Indigenous communities to ensure that that first wave did not hit them particularly hard, and that throughout this second wave, we continue to be there for them. We will continue to be there to support communities across Manitoba, for example, that are suffering a terrible spike in that province. Communities across the prairies facing challenges right now. The federal government will continue to be there to work with them, to protect them, to support them, and we will continue to do so with experts as we roll out vaccines to the most vulnerable populations.
The Honourable Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, COVID cases are rapidly rising and long-term care is in crisis today. The time to wait for supports is over, yet long-term care continues to be left out of federal programs. Still, there is no adequate access to rapid testing, and now Canada is falling behind the pack in receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. Long-term care residents, their families, and those who care for them are owed much better. Mr. Speaker, where is the Liberal government's detailed plan on testing and vaccine deployment?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we have worked hand in hand with the provinces to support them in their areas of jurisdiction. We sent over $25 billion to provinces to ensure safe back to schools for kids and to support the most vulnerable, including people in long-term care facilities. We sent the Canadian Armed Forces and the Red Cross to support the provinces in their work to keep seniors safe in long-term care facilities. And we will ensure, as we move forward on vaccine rollouts, that we're working again with the provinces to protect those who most need it when on delivery of vaccines.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, seniors have been the hardest hit Canadians during the COVID-19 crisis. They've been isolated from their families for weeks at a time. They've waited months for rapid testings in their community and in long-term care facilities. Now they're going to be waiting months as other countries get vaccines before Canada. How many more outbreaks will Canadian long-term care homes experience because this Prime Minister didn't get priority access to a COVID-19 vaccine?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we have been there to support our seniors, and we will continue to do that. We've worked with the provinces to support them in their work in keeping seniors safe in long-term care facilities. We respect provincial jurisdiction, but we're also able to step up and provide extra supports so provinces can do more to prevent outbreaks in long-term care homes, whether it was billions of dollars to protect the most vulnerable, whether it was supports with extra PPE, whether it's moving forward to share best practices and move towards national standards. We will continue to be there to protect our seniors, particularly around vaccines.
On August 24th, 2015, in Belleville, Ontario, someone made this promise: no veteran will be forced to fight their own government for the support and compensation that they've earned. Yet, since 2016, the person who said that has spent $43.5 million fighting veterans and their families in court, forcing them to fight for the support and compensation that they've earned. Well, whoever made that promise and broke it, please stand up and explain to veterans and their families why he broke that promise.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, service delivery and support to veterans and their families has been our priority from the very beginning. Since 2016, we've invested nearly $10.5 billion in new money for our veterans and their families. This funding was invested in new centres of excellence on chronic pain and post-traumatic stress disorder, on increased financial compensation and more. That stands in stark contrast to the Conservative approach, including from the Leader of the Opposition, which was to close offices, fire staff and gut Veterans Affairs while nickel-and-diming them and using them for photo ops. Our veterans deserve better. That's what we're delivering on.
Full member for Barrie Innisfil.
Who used it for photo ops? Yet the Liberals keep fighting veterans and their families in court, and it continues. 1,400 veterans have filed a class action lawsuit. Veterans Charles Scott and John Dow, among many others, have their government fighting them in court for the support that they've earned. The benefits system for veterans is in complete chaos, and the responsibility for that lies at his feet. Like so many other promises that he made in 2015 and has since broken, will the Prime Minister explain to veterans and their families why he continues forcing them to fight in court for the support and compensation that they've earned?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one of the very first promises we made to veterans when we were looking to take office in 2015 is that we would reopen the 9 Veterans Affairs offices heartlessly shuttered by the Conservatives, and that's exactly what we did. And on top of that, we invested over $10 billion in new money for veterans and their families to help them and their families through difficult times. That is what we are there for. We're continuing to pick up the pieces broken by years of Conservative neglect. We will continue to deliver for our veterans.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister should check. All of the veterans' offices are closed right now, in fact. Why isn't he not opening them up? Mr. Speaker, I was proud to work with veterans to settle lawsuits. He spent $40 million sending veterans to court. And this week, Legions testified that their late support is causing Legions across the country to close. Legions not only help our veterans, Mr. Speaker, better than this government clearly, they form strong communities. Record backlogs, wait times, a Prime Minister who doesn't keep his commitments. Does this Prime Minister still believe veterans are asking for more than he can give?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Jokes, Mr. Speaker. That's what the member opposite delivers for veterans in this House. Jokes about the pandemic and closures of veterans' offices. That is shameful, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, it's entirely consistent with what that Leader of the Opposition did when he was Minister for Veterans Affairs and what his predecessor, Julian Fantino, did when he was Minister of Affairs. They shut down veterans' offices, which we then reopened. We invested $10 billion in new money for veterans. We will be there for our veterans, unlike the things that they did for veterans.
The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I am immensely proud to rise in this House today to ask a question that is top of mind for my constituents in Toronto Centre, and I would say indeed all Canadians who are deeply concerned about how we are going to address climate change and how we can retool our economy for the future. Can the Prime Minister please update this House on how we can get to a cleaner future and a stronger economy?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Toronto Centre for an important question, and know she will proudly represent her constituents in this House for many years to come. Climate change remains one of the greatest challenges of our times. That is why last week we introduced the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, which lays out a framework of accountability and transparency to reach the goal of net zero emissions in a way that gives Canadians confidence. This is a fundamental step in our strategy to build a strong, resilient economy and future that works for everyone. To combat anti-Semitism at home and abroad.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Liberals are announcing another plan for childcare. While it is vitally important that we have childcare, particularly in the recovery, given that women were disproportionately impacted, don't mind me if I don't hold my breath, given the fact that Liberals have promised childcare since the 90s, since kids who needed childcare have grown up and have kids who now need childcare. So what we need is a concrete action plan. At least $2 billion to keep the existing childcare spaces open, and $10 billion a year to truly create a universal childcare plan. Will the government back up this announcement with real concrete action to deliver the childcare we need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we understand the immense pressure that COVID-19 has put on Canadian families, particularly on women. That's why investing more than $7.5 billion in early learning and childcare over the next decade is what we're going to do. This year alone, we've invested more than $1 billion to help provinces and territories with childcare, but we're not stopping there. In the speech from the throne, we committed to building on our investments and creating a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. We will continue to work with the provinces and territories so that all families have access to the high-quality and affordable childcare they deserve.
Question orale. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, months ago, Conservatives began raising alarms that Canadians would get vaccines after many other countries. Yesterday, the Prime Minister acknowledged we were right. The Centre for Disease Control has said that the first Americans will receive a COVID-19 in the next 2 weeks. Why did this Prime Minister sign deals that placed Canadians months behind Americans for getting a COVID-19 vaccine?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past months, experts have worked with this government to put Canadians in the very best possible position on vaccines. We now have the best, most diverse portfolio of vaccines anywhere in the world, including agreements with all of the leading vaccine candidates for more doses per capita than just about any other country. We are continuing to work with experts on a rollout plan, and we have faith in our top scientists and doctors as we take a whole-of-government approach to delivering vaccines for Canadians as soon as possible.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, so far we know that Canada will receive its vaccine only after the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, India, Indonesia. The list goes on. The combined population of countries ahead of Canada in the distribution line is almost 2.5 billion people. Mr. Speaker, to the nearest 100 million, can the Prime Minister tell the House how many vaccines will be delivered to the rest of the world before a delivery is made to Canada?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have worked with top scientists and experts to deliver to Canadians the very best help possible, whether it was making sure we had the right PPE, whether we move forward on the right support for our treatments and medical system, and as we move forward on vaccines, which I know everyone is eagerly awaiting because that'll signal the beginning of the end of this pandemic. Well, this summer, our experts came together and recommended a portfolio of vaccines that have actually put Canada at the very top in terms of per capita doses, and those very experts are ensuring that we roll out vaccines to all Canadians.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister admitted the beginning of the end of the pandemic starts later in Canada. The Minister of Procurement has said that Health Canada approvals could also delay vaccine distribution even more. The Prime Minister has previously said it's not his job to ensure rapid tests and other things are approved rapidly. So I want to know, Mr. Speaker, does this Prime Minister think it is his job to get a vaccine approved quickly? Yes or no?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we are working to ensure that Canadians have vaccines as quickly as possible, and indeed that was part of why we worked with experts to ensure that we have the best possible portfolio of vaccines, including more doses per capita than just about any other country. The Minister of Procurement has worked extremely hard and is delivering on that. We also know that there are three vaccine candidates, three of the top vaccine candidates that are currently now being examined by Health Canada for approvals. We are doing that as is done, to be safe for Canadians and to make sure we can get vaccines quickly.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président, le ministre de la...
Mr. Speaker, the Quebec Minister of Health made a specific request to the federal government. He requested a clear and quick plan to be presented on vaccine distribution. The provinces need such a plan in their fight against COVID-19. Unfortunately, 10 months later, the PM has admitted that he does not have a plan. Will the Prime Minister make his vaccine distribution plan public? And if so, when? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we have delivered on a plan to protect Canadians. That plan has ended up with us having the best vaccine portfolio in the world, with more doses per capita than any other country. We have done the work to have access to vaccines, and now we are working with the provinces and our partners to deliver those vaccines to Canadians. We will continue to work with experts, and we will have more to say about this in the weeks to come. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said he was in favour of Bill 101. That's a first for a party that has always challenged that legislation. The Conservatives have proposed concrete measures like applying Bill 101 to federally regulated businesses. Quebecers want more than pretty words from this government, Mr. Speaker. Will this Liberal government apply Bill 101 to federally regulated enterprises? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. As a proud Quebecer, Mr. Speaker, I've always known that the best way to ensure that Canada remains bilingual is to have a Quebec that remains majoritarily francophone. And that is what this government has been working for some time. But I don't appreciate having the Conservatives preach to us about protecting French, given that they have opposed only appointing bilingual judges to the Supreme Court. They support appointing unilingual Anglophone judges to the Supreme Court. We're not there anymore, Mr. Speaker. We're going to protect French in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada.
Comment.